It is Power Lunch on Power 98.7. We're into the psychology of being raised and raising a child who is not your own. All right, so let's delve into a subject that touches the hearts of countless families. And if you are not raising a child of your home, perhaps in cultures like ours, we've got lots of grandparents who are raising their grandchildren, aunts and uncles who are raising their nieces and nephews, older siblings after losing one or both of parents start looking after their younger parent. And it's become very much a part of our culture in a lot of ways, but support is necessary. So in this discussion, we will explore what it feels like to grow up under circumstances like this. So Pabi Moloi, there are five, but then Naki number six, because cousin, but they don't treat you any differently, but perhaps in your mind there's something different, right? Perhaps you are so grateful to be out of the circumstances that you come from that you feel feelings of love and gratitude and a real sense of identity to be the child of these extraordinary people. Even if you are adopted, I'd love to hear what your story is. Because I think from an adoption point of view, people look from the outside and they think, oh, you're so lucky you were adopted. But maybe deep inside of you, want to be with your parents. Even if you live go garage or even if you live in a shack, you want to be with your parents, right? But you're not ever allowed to say that, perhaps, because you are a adoptee and you should, quote unquote, be grateful for it. So there's just so many things that we can discuss here. Parenting Coach Ayanda Tetyana is with us for this one. How are you doing, Ayanda?
I'm great, Pabi. And I wanted to just say there's certain questions you must just never ask a man.
You must never ask a man.
Yes, about the previous topic. But anyway.
But are you sending your son where you don't know?
We're not ready for that conversation.
Because our kids are young or because this is another topic altogether?
I just think that, like, in terms of just stereotypes where even as a man, you feel whether you have it or not have it. It says a whole lot about who you are. We're just not ready to have those conversations yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to get ourselves ready because people are moving on. And, some people love, tradition. You must be traditional. But they have no dynamism in their tradition. And so a lot of traditions will die out as a result of that. So you're right. Maybe we're not ready. Well, maybe some are not ready. But for those who are ready, I think it would be a very important conversation to have. Okay, so extended families, right? I mean, perhaps we start with the easiest to the toughest, or the toughest to the easiest, wherever you think. But I'm thinking about, you're raised in an extended family. It's your sister's child. And what are some of the psychological effects or emotional struggles that you see in children raised by extended families?
So it obviously depends what are the situations where they're coming from, but and also the age in which they're coming into the new family.
Yes.
There'll be a whole lot of psychological issues that the children will be dealing with. So we're talking about, can you imagine if you're a 12-year-old, for instance, you already have so much in terms of your identity.
Yeah.
Now being pulled from your home and being put into this new house. And there's a whole lot of loss, displacement. In many instances, we don't really sit down and really explain some of these issues to our children as to what has happened. And obviously that breeds a bit of abandonment fear because now you're not really sure what happened. Wasn't I worth my parents fighting for me? Did they not want me anymore? And then in certain instances where you are maybe as a child moving into maybe a better home than the garage or whatever's happening in your previous situation.
Sure.
Then there's just that, you get all these better privileges and you're in between, but my other siblings are not getting the same, and I'm also happy, but. So,
because that's also a possibility that Ayanda goes to live with Auntie Mang Mang, but Ayanda's sister doesn't.
Yeah.
I'd imagine that's very difficult. And, in all of the adoption topic podcasts and the books that I've been reading, they don't really ever want to separate siblings. And I imagine it's for that exact reason. So guardians are already trying to strike balance between discipline and nurturing. But if you are in a caregiving setup, how do you try to do that?
Oh, that becomes tricky because almost overnight, you now have to become this disciplinarian to this child.
Yes.
And obviously, the childhood environments that we come from already would have dictated a lot in terms of what we as children become and what we come to expect. So now you can imagine in a new home, new rules, new everything, it becomes a bit of a hard one, where now there's a lot of expectation as an adult in the space that we have to be a little bit more extra patient with the children who are coming into the family. But then at the same time, then you have your own children who are now going to start saying, why are you treating us differently?
Yes.
So now you start juggling that and trying to be fair and trying to be consistent with everyone becomes a bit of a tricky one, which is why emotional maturity is so important, being able to have communication with all your children and constantly explain the situation.
Yeah.
And hopefully they can even work together to help the child adjust.
100%, because as the parent who gave birth, every now and then you're going to say, oh, here's a piece of chocolate, or, like something stupid like that, right? Not like great decisions. But in a small child's mind, that already elevates them or makes them special or gives them permission to be disrespectful. So you've got to, as the parent, be very, very careful that everybody's getting the same amount of cake at cake time, that everybody is being given enough attention at all times so that that exact thing doesn't happen. Because once you're gone, then shouldn't they be staying behind with siblings?
Yeah, and you don't want resentment either to say now that the new child has come, we no longer have certain privileges because now the finances have become very tricky. So this is where this open communication is very important.
Yes.
And sometimes it will become uncomfortable because children tend to have a very different way of perceiving things. Yeah. And sometimes they'll question you. But when you allow them to discuss some of the issues they have, and guide them through their thinking, it basically will help them also get along, and then you can even maybe, depending on the age, work towards different rules differently. I'm imagining something as basic as, say, one prefers cereals and the other prefers porridge. And now you have to discuss or debate some of these issues because finances don't allow. Have a conversation as a family and be very open about it to say, listen, this is our situation now, so what will we try out? Maybe you can have different things over the different months, but if you have it like that, it becomes very hard to have silent resentment that the children may start to have if they don't understand what's happening.
Let's keep carrying this conversation forward. It's the psychology of being raised and raising a child who is not your biological own. And we'll take your calls after this, your 1:30 Power headlines.
Speak up. Call the Power line on 0861 987 000.
Right, raising a child and being raised as a child who is not a biological child to that family, or maybe, but external, extended family. So that's really the crux of the conversation today. And Ayanda Tetyana is with us as our parenting coach. I think it's so interesting. It's just thinking about it as having siblings, right? Having different children, but with an extra sensitivity, Ayanda.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, the reality is the socioeconomic issues within our country have just put us, and the history as well, it has put us in a situation where this happens a lot more than we can imagine. And it's not just a family issue, it's a societal issue. And it usually has emotional consequences for everyone who is involved.
All right. So what about the idea of survivor's guilt? Children who were raised by relatives, and we've kind of touched on it. If your sister stays behind or has to go with this parent and you have to, you get the rich aunt. I keep thinking of the rich aunt. And so, there is a measure of survivor's guilt. Is it survivor's guilt or what guilt is it? What are we talking about here?
So it's just, that idea of why me, and then obviously in the long term, the different privileges that you then get. And here's where the survival guilt I've seen in terms of some of the clients I work with, where you have one child who goes and lives with the extended family, grandma, rich aunt, and then they do better off in terms of just their socioeconomic issues.
Yeah.
And then now in terms of taking care of everyone else, in terms of their own biological siblings, there becomes a whole lot of blackmailing as well that happens. And that could be quite a lot as well for this particular child, if you can imagine.
From which sibling to which sibling? Who's blackmailing whom?
So you could imagine the child who goes out to live with the rich aunt has better prospects, goes to university, gets the best job.
Yeah.
And then in terms of coming back and having to take care of the siblings who may not have gotten all those access to the different resources. And then just being or whatever's needed in terms of supporting her own biological siblings who, obviously she didn't really grow up with. But then there's this expectation that you have done better, so therefore take care of us. But then there's all these boundaries issues that usually become an issue.
The boundary issues which become an issue. Tell me more about that.
So you can imagine if for instance, I have 4 or 5 siblings, and one of my siblings does a way better off and goes and spends most of their teen life with another aunt. They are in a better financial situation as they progress in life because they've had better opportunities.
Yeah.
They've had all these doors open. But as a family, in terms of the biological family, we may not necessarily be on the same level. Now, there would be all these expectations to say, hey, you've got these opportunities, you have money, now can you take care of us? And just how far do you then go in terms of you as this individual who was blessed with these opportunities, and at the same time you have your own things that you want to do, but you also have this responsibility that you may feel. But then the boundaries.
Yeah, you've got to set the boundary.
You've got to set the boundaries.
Yeah, you absolutely.
And then everyone is constantly saying, but you were lucky, you got to have a better life, so now you have to take care of us, and not even understanding some of the challenges that you would have had as an individual going through all of that and the hard work you've had to put into,
Which I can imagine impacts a child's long-term self-esteem and sense of identity.
Yeah. Exactly.
Big time. Many caregivers struggle with guilt and they feel resentment or exhaustion. So I don't know why I can't speak today, but you understand what I'm saying. Okay. So Ayanda's my big sister. God forbid something happens to her. Ayanda's 3 children then come and live with me and my 1 child. Now, if I was tired before, now I'm quadruply tired.
Mm-hmm.
And every now and then, maybe let's not say you passed away. Maybe we say you went to jail, right? Every day I'm resenting the gun, the crime, the car, the shootout, and then obviously that can spill over into the children as well. And as a caregiver, it must be very difficult to be able to control yourself so that the kids don't even get a whiff of that.
Yeah, I think that's probably the scariest and the hardest thing that we would have to come to terms with.
Yeah.
Because the reality is that when people think about parenting, they think it's all beautiful and sunshine and roses. And I'm even talking when it comes to your own biological children. But the reality is it's not always like that. So you can imagine if it's even worse in terms of just whatever situations you're going through in terms of juggling your own life and then all these situations that you didn't necessarily plan for, So in those situations, that requires a lot more in terms of you as a parent who now has to take on that responsibility, just working on some of your own issues so that you obviously don't spread that out to the children, I think the hardest part of that responsibility of an adult is that when we are touching these children, we are not just touching them for this moment that we are stranded, or it's like a legacy that we're imprinting on them. So how we talk to them, how we treat them becomes how they see themselves. So in dealing with that emotional exhaustion and everything, we have to put in a whole lot more effort. We need to find support system. We need to, make sure that we are not giving these children harmful messaging. That will become a lifetime. Words like you should feel grateful. That there's another concept that I've seen a lot in some of the clients I work with, where if a child is usually, let's say, a step parent or an extended child who's coming to live in the family, there's an expectation that that child should listen and do what is expected. And that's almost like breeding an environment where you have a child who's a people pleaser. And it may look nice because they jump and they make tea and they do everything. But in the long term, when they have to start being adults in their own lives, they tend to struggle with coming to terms with their own voice. So it's like a juggling, where as parents we have to bear all of that in mind and almost be as fair as we can, if it's possible, have empathy towards whatever the children are going through, and try to get the support so that we can come into the situation as best as we can and as fair as possible.
I mean, I don't think anybody's a perfect parent and a perfect person, but it's almost like the notion with the example that I gave you, that on your last day and your release date, then all of your 3 children are there, and I'm there with mine, and we're welcoming mummy home, and we're there with flowers. We know that they don't give you nice shoes, so we've got you a Cortez or an Air Force or whatever. And basically, you can see throughout the time that you've been away from your children that your name's never been dragged, that your actions have never been dragged, that your children have never been without, and it's not physical things, without love, without tenderness. You can see that my kids are okay.
Yes.
And that's what you hope as a caregiver, to be able to, if it's not a permanent caregiving position, give the child back, better off than you left them or you found them. And if it is permanent, I mean, that's what you do. You remember that relative and you enjoy that relative.
Yeah.
Let's turn a corner. Mama and Papa are divorced. Mama, okay, let's say Papa starts having relationships, right? Talk to me about the being raised as somebody who is from a divorced family. So, Papa or Mama can start introducing you to everybody they date. or they don't introduce you to anybody. They don't date. They're just, they're just focusing on you, or whatever some of the situations may emerge, even until the point of, step moms and dads living with bio moms and dads.
So it's very important that as we are playing our roles of being parents, that we also continue to live our own lives and have our own needs being met. Because if we don't, that's where our cups get very empty very fast.
Of course.
That's where some of the resentment comes, I know some parents who will say, hey, I've contributed so much, I've done all this for you, and you're like, and then you get to a point where the kids are not even like appreciative of whatever you thought you were doing for them. So I always speak about the importance of us as adults always having some kind of cognition of who I am as an individual, what are my needs, and then obviously depending on the different situations, you don't necessarily have to bring every person to your kids, because then that also brings another psychological issue in terms of just, different partners. I always say some of the relationships, they can just end kamoka gating,
I'm laughing because I know what you mean, and then I also know what it could also mean. So yes, you're right. You're absolutely right.
And then I hope that in terms of just the characters of the people who we end up dating, especially when we have children, we bear in mind, so that when it comes to a point where they do get to meet our children, say for instance your child is now looking up to the stepfather as a role model, what are they teaching your son? What are they teaching your daughter? I think in many instances that's the one thing in relationships that we tend to not do as adults. We feel the butterflies first, and then when we have to look at the CV, just in terms of just the character of who we fall in love with, becomes a problem. And I think that when you do have children, that's where it matters the most, because then these people become this extra support that we have in terms of our children, and you just want to make sure that you can do better in terms of having a better model for your kids.
You've got to verify. You've got to verify who this person is and how they operate, and how then once you say perhaps get married and your initial child is there, and then there's a new child.
Yeah.
Tell me about some of those potential issues.
So I wanted to say that maybe one thing that we also need to be aware of, and something we do a lot in psychology, where when you are trying to understand who Pabi is, ask a lot of questions about her childhood.
Okay.
So that's going to give you a lot in terms of just what is important to you in terms of your values. What have you seen? So it's very easy for someone who did not have a father figure, who did not have a great mother role model, to become everything that we see in this country in terms of the social economic issues. So you want to almost be clear, at least if you're getting into those, have your eyes open, and then just the character and the values that come with parenting. I'm talking things like discipline. I'm talking things like, how do you love the stepchild compared to the one you didn't have together as a biological child, and those things, usually if you're talking to someone and you hear some of the favoritism that they experience as a child and how they feel about it, it's going to be a bit of a trigger in terms of saying, okay, maybe I need to talk more about this. Is this something that this person realizes that it's something that bothers him? Because sometimes it's so easy to continue the hurt that we've experienced and not be aware of it. And for me, that's probably the hardest thing when we talk about just bringing new people into our children's lives, choosing new partners. And in many instances, when I sit with a group of ladies and I'm talking about character of whoever, I'm telling you now, we don't really know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why there are a huge amount of women who'll say, once my child is 18, then I'll date again. Doesn't matter. I'm 64, but I'm a flippin' hot 64. It's fine. Because you actually just don't know what you're going to get. And that can be quite frightening. Are there cultural myths or beliefs that you know of or feel that harm both caregiver and child in situations where, there's no biological bond?
Oh, definitely. Things like blood is thicker than water, you know, and family is everything, such that when there's been any kind of transgression, things must be swept under the carpet, So some of these cultural things, you know, they have their time and place, and maybe in today's world, we do need to shed them off and start having deeper conversations. But that would be like an individual in terms of you in your own family, in terms of your values, saying, listen, some of these things we grew up seeing them, but I will not accept that in terms of just being able to have the different and the difficult conversations, which sometimes make us very vulnerable, which sometimes makes us seem like we don't know what we are doing to our kids. And that's probably what we are scared of the most. But for me, it's like, your child will get to grow up and realize actually they'll see that actually we didn't really know what we were doing, So, you do the best you can. You try to be as open as you can. And I think more than anything else, it's just that open communication as you're going through everything with the new child who's coming into the family, with the child who is now your stepchild, in terms of your blended family. Just continue to have the conversation. And hopefully as they grow up, they'll come to understand you more. When you don't know what you're doing, I've never been afraid to tell my kids, listen, I'm struggling. I don't know what I'm doing. It's just something that I've really said to myself is an important part, so that when they grow up, they get to realize that some of the things that they're going to experience as well is not always black and white. They're going to be confused and not know what is the best way to go.
Very interesting times talking.
Sorry, Pabi, I wanted to add something else.
Sure.
I wanted to say that, some of the issues also, when we have these blended families, when we talk about the open communication, it's just this expectation that because everyone else is in a loving or feels loved, that everyone else will feel the same. So this is where that fear and the vulnerability, it's supposed to be very clear about this open door, open communication, so that when the one child is not feeling this, not feeling whatever the rules are, whatever the family values are, we as parents are able to almost respond to them individually. When we talk about the whole concept of parenting, when you have more than two children, you'll realize that you will never respond in the way that both of them will be okay. Your biological ones may come to accept you, and it might be like, oh, mom, whatnot.
Got it.
But it might be a little bit trickier for the one who's coming into the family. So this is where taking care in terms of just being responsive to them and maybe just spending a little more time. You could even do something as have family rituals, nothing hectic. I'm not necessarily very traditional, but let's say, for instance, a coffee on every Sunday morning, or walking to the park, things like that. And you can have affirmation, words of affirmation. And if you go to church together, whatever within your context of, you want to take a little bit extra care to make sure that that child feels like they have a safe space. As I said, more than anything else, everything we do to them in this environment, years later, when they are doing certain things, it will come back. If you think about anyone who has trauma, the trauma usually comes back from these early ages. It just shows how important this parenting is, the environments that we parent our children are. And in many instances, I think as adults, we're not really aware of that. So when we raise the alarm about how important parenting is, how we need to do this consciously aware. I think sometimes it's okay for parents to actually say, I'm not ready, to have children. I'm not ready to take on this
Hang on, wait.
responsibility.
Once the child is here or before the child is here? Because
I mean, even if the child is there, because I'll speak to a situation that happens within my community. Someone who was a close friend of mine, where they had to take on responsibility of the sister's children after they passed away. But let me tell you, the abuse the children were enduring.
Okay.
It's extremely scary.
Okay,
It's
I
so
get
scary
you.
that you'd cringe, because she would even be violent in public.
Yeah.
So for me, that is a person who shouldn't have taken on the responsibility of taking those additional children.
Let's quickly speak to Tsepo in Bryanston. How's it, Tsepo?
Okay, new Pabi.
Okay.
Yeah, Pabi, this is touching. It hits deep to me. Because I think when I met my late wife, she had a 2-year-old. And now, how do you control a 2-year-old not to be attached to the person that is not her parent? You can't, because the child would want to play with one, and then you must be part of that. So there was this thing in the house that every time when the child is trying to play with me, then the mother will say, no, don't do that. No, don't do that. So, which means for me, and I think we had a conversation one day, then I said to her, don't put me as a in this house as is a situation between me and you. You must put me in a situation that I'm here for you and your child, because I'm also have a child that I'm bringing in. So I expect you to do the same thing also, to be a mother to that child as much as I must be a father to this one. So we went on and on and on. I think I started to get closer to the child when the mother started to get sick, because now there was nobody. The mother was not there, always in hospital. So I then started to take charge of then being a parent, a father to this child. But I must say, for what I did, I raised a very lovely girl. She's now in matric. Last week I was doing her matric dance, and she's so lovely. So what I'm saying is, sometimes parents themselves also need to also look at their mentality or how they treat the situation. It cannot just be me coming in as a stepfather and then you want to treat me as an outsider, but we are building a family. You see, so I think it as much as it goes for, collectively, the parents also must also put in their mind that I need to make sure that I'm in love with this person. I'm introducing this person to this child.
And I'm going to allow.
And then I'm going to allow this person to actually be able to be part of that.
Thank you, Tsepo. Thank you. I think that's such a great... I could be all wrong because I'm not very good at these things. But it sounds great to me. If you, as the biological parent, set the tone. So you set the tone for how their relationship will be. This is the now husband, stepfather or stepmother, I wonder what your closing comments are about that, Ayanda.
So here's the tricky thing. So usually, depending on my relationship with my father or whomever was the father figure in my life, I would project whatever fears or whatever in terms of just the experiences that I had. So, this is where it becomes very tricky in terms of just us meeting each other and falling in love and not necessarily knowing and wanting to build a family, not necessarily knowing some of the traumas and some of the pains that we come from.
Yeah.
Because in many instances when things like that happen, you'll find that that particular individual would have had some kind of issues of abuse or something like that happened to them, and they're not necessarily able to communicate that and say, this is why I'm scared, and then obviously work together towards a solution that is comfortable and safe for everyone.
Should we just all be in therapy?
I always say,
Hey?
everybody, we are all carrying a whole lot of baggage.
There's so much going on, yeah.
And I wish that we were able to realize that when we do go to therapy, we would actually help the next person, because we'll be able to identify our own triggers. We'll be able to know that this is not about you, Pabi. Yes, I'm triggered because maybe you said 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
But actually, the issue is where I'm coming from with this and what it does to me. It makes me feel like that 12-year-old
Yeah.
who didn't have power, and then now I want to throw balls and whatnot. And some of the very unhealthy coping mechanisms that we've come to adopt. It's a pity we don't have enough conversations about our mental health and some of the childhood issues that we've had and how they've come to make us what we think we are. We think we're imbokotos. We think we're the man of the house.
I mean, sometimes you have to be the man, you have to be the plumber, you have to be the swimming coach. Sometimes you have to. It just is that way. But I think you're absolutely right. The gap needs to be made. And a lot of that hurt comes from things that we experienced in our childhood. And the more healing, the more grieving, the better life would be. How do we find you and the work you do?
On Instagram, I'm Aya the Parent Coach, and then on Facebook, I'm Ayanda Tetyana, and then my website is theparentcoach.co.za.
Okay, perfect. Always lovely talking to you, Ayanda. Thank you very much.